of our cabinet members, but I'm sure they'll come back. Right. So, moving on to Q4 year-end, item 7. I'll ask the officer to briefly introduce the report, and then I'll call on the members who indicate they wish to speak by clicking the raised hand icon in turn. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Kate Pask. I'm the Corporate Performance Manager. The report gives an overview of our performance position at year-end 23-24 against the corporate plan and the delivery plan for 23-24, with a more detailed performance dashboard provided as Appendix 1. All of the information and analysis is set out by the 7 wellbeing objectives in order to help understand how we are progressing against the corporate plan as a whole. The report and dashboard also provide a reminder of the scoring framework we are using to judge our performance. Section 3 of the report, there are summary charts and tables which show our overall performance against commitments, performance indicators and trend analysis for the year, highlighting performance compared to last year. Slightly new, we have chart 4, which is intended to give a visual summary of performance against all of the data at a glance. It should hopefully allow members to identify areas of good performance where there is a cluster of greens, or poor performance where there is concentration of reds, and identify which wellbeing objective or specific aim these belong to in order to locate them in the detailed dashboard. So now I will take members to recommendations in paragraph 9.
Thank you for that. Councillors, do you have any questions? I think I had Councillor Griffiths down as the first question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. Yeah, I think my overall question on this is how we achieve a balance between this particular report and what it drives our behaviour compared to the first 2 reports that we've looked at today. In other words, in the straightened financial position, we probably need to focus more on the cost saving, and with a recognition that some of these indicators will go darker. They will move a little bit more towards an amber if they're green, or they may move to a red if they're an amber. And I think we need to get a balance between the cost savings and these performance. And I wondered how officers might think about that, and whether we need to recognise that sometimes there's a much higher cost in achieving excellent, whereas average or good enough is actually good enough, and how we might be able to use this to identify areas where we could actually make cost savings.
Thank you. Do you want to come in? Oh, who would like to come in? Right, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. It's a very good point, and it's one we've actually been thinking about over the last couple of months, because obviously in the main, these performance measures measure what's in the corporate plan and the indicators that we've identified. I think one of the things that's become apparent is that sometimes perhaps that doesn't give you an overview of how we might all perceive that area performing. And so the balance is, to an extent, how much do you therefore sense check it and say, as you just described, for example, if something's performing well, but we know it's overspent by a considerable margin, should that affect whether we think it's green, or in fact, should it be amber, should it be yellow? And I think there's also an element of business as usual stuff that is not included. So sometimes we have very broad well-being objectives, for example, don't we? And again, there may be a relatively narrow set of objectives, or a relatively narrow set of performance indicators. And again, sometimes what happens is that those all seemingly are green, but then someone screams, well, I can't believe you've made that green overall. It doesn't look right. So I think Alex, Kate and I have been discussing how we can perhaps sense check some of this and make it more meaningful moving forward. I suppose my caveat is, the more you make it subjective as opposed to directly related to the actual indicators we've set, we probably end up in more dispute and probably longer meetings. But I think there is an element of us wanting to try and achieve that in the way you described. Now, the other part of what you said was about when is something, is striving for excellent, perhaps not realistic at the moment. I'm going to say, and you've heard it from Karis already, this comes back to what I think is about ruthless prioritisation. We just need to be incredibly clear about what our priorities are as an organisation. There may be an argument that the 7 wellbeing objectives may be too many, or maybe we do accept that on some of them it's going to take us longer, for example, to become excellent or good in some of the indicators. So I think there is something as part of the process that was described earlier, and I think part of that process is liaising with elected members. It'll also be liaising with the public as part of what we intend to do later this year. But frankly, and I think this is what you're alluding to, it'll also be based on affordability, won't it? And I think we'll have to throw all those things into the pot and come to conclusions about what we think we can achieve on each of the areas based on resources. Because I think we need to be realistic, don't we? We'd all want to be excellent at everything. But in a scenario where we're describing that we're going to be 20% smaller, we're not going to be able to do everything to the same level or same frequency if we do it at all. I think we'd all accept also that we're not going to be excellent at everything either. So I think it's a very valid point. I hope I've given you a flavour of some of the conversations that we're having and perhaps some of the improvements we hope to make on this moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that answer your question there, Councillor Griffiths?
Yeah, I think if I summarise at a very high level, I really want to see fewer reds in the first two reports and possibly a few more ambers and yellows in this report and fewer greens. I think that sort of summarises it in that way.
Thank you. Councillor Winstanley?
Okay, so I want us to also look at what can we afford of the performance indicators can we afford to reduce? And I want us to look at afford in a different way to financial as well, because that is critical. What can we afford to lose as performance indicators that won't be to the detriment of our communities and won't be to the detriment of lots of the brilliant goals that we set ourselves? And so I'm sort of looking at it in a different angle to perhaps Simon, but it's the same overall question. What can we afford to do less well, and what can't we afford to do less well? And let's prioritise those things that we need to do. And that need can be on the basis of statutory, but it can also be on the goal of society goals as well. What can't we afford to do, and what can we afford to do? Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is a $6 million question, isn't it? So over to you, Chief Exec.
And if, Chair, you're going to give me $6 million, that will help considerably. I'm going to repeat myself to an extent, and I will elaborate. I mean, this is what I'm saying about prioritisation, because I suppose to an extent we may all have different views about the things that we think are our biggest priority and the things that we think that we shouldn't compromise on and the things that we think that we should. So there would be a cohort of members, I'm sure, that would say the most important thing is, performance in our schools, opportunities for young people realising their potential. And therefore there would be a view that we shouldn't compromise on that WBO, and that would relate to the funding and the prioritisation in that way. But if I suggested to you, and I'm not suggesting this, but if I said to you, for example, there are other things that we could do, but we could do more slowly, not ideally, but out of necessity. So we could, for example, process planning applications more slowly. The problem would be that I can guarantee that we would have certainly members of the public and probably members who would then say to me that planning application has been stuck for ages. It's really important. It creates jobs or whatever it might be. So I suspect it's quite a complex conversation and one that we do need to spend time and trying to get some sort of consensus on. But I know, I mentioned the member briefing on Monday, I know from my post bag that there are relatively few things that people will naturally say that they're prepared for us to get worse at or not do, and that's the conversation we need to have. My own personal view is that we have a set of priorities which talks about protecting the most vulnerable. I always come back to, well, what are the things only the local authority can do, and if we don't do them, they won't be able to get any service from anywhere else. Even that doesn't narrow it down hugely, but that's an interesting starting point from my point of view. But I also know that there are other very strong views, including from some politicians, about when you knock the door, actually what you get is lots of stuff about the street scene, lots of stuff about the local community, about place, and I get that as well. The challenge is, as I think you've heard from a number of people, we probably can't do it all to the same level. But so I hear entirely what you're saying, Councillor Stanley, just to sum up. But I think we've got to get to a place, haven't we, where we have some level of agreement about the things that we're not going to invest in the same way, or we're prepared to accept lower performance, and then we would alter this, accordingly, essentially.
Thank you. Does that answer the question for you? Yes. I think as well, it sort of throws up the question, do we need to look ever so slightly at amending our focus, amending where we are reporting and have some sort of extra report to members across the board at the council that says priority 1, priority 2, priority 3 in the most simplistic terms, so that all members know what the priorities are for the council going forward, maybe, because I don't think we do it like that at the moment, and that might well be helpful for members. I don't know your thoughts on that, though.
Again, as a principle, I don't disagree. I think the challenge is agreeing what the priorities are in which order. I think we can then, once those are established, I think we can then manage in that way. If it's crystal clear that members are saying to us that's our absolute number one priority and it's ahead of everything else, and we want to make sure Mark, that you ensure that happens, then we can do that, and I'm pretty sure we'd make it happen. Our challenge is, and I'm genuinely not trying to be awkward, is that we have an awful lot of priorities, and I always say if everything's a priority, well, nothing's a priority, and that's part of the problem, is that there's been, over the last 10, 12 years, Carys were reflecting that we've lost £88 million as part of savings. If you also look, it's quite interesting when you look at it, there's very few things that we don't do anymore, even though we've lost £88 million. I would suggest some of that is probably because there was some savings and some efficiency to make, but also we haven't managed very effectively perhaps expectations. So what we've done is we've taken £88 million out of the budget, but I think largely people's expectations are either the same or often sometimes higher than they were when we had a full capacity. So this is part of this process, but I think I agree with you. If we could get to the point where not only do we have priorities, but within those priorities we're very clear about the things that is the main priority, the second priority, the third priority, it would make my job considerably easier. But you know, I don't underestimate the challenge of getting there, because I don't think naturally, not just on political grounds, but just on our own personal grounds, I don't think we naturally just agree on everything, do we? There will be people that feel very strongly about certain things.
I agree as well. I think resourcing to do that, to get those priorities in place, will be difficult, because obviously you'd have to do consultations, blah, blah, blah. That might well put pressures on already stretched resources, even though the outcome is, the intention for the outcome is honourable, basically, to help. Moving forward, Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question is on page 101, and it's to do with staff sickness. So we've got the Q4 results here, and this shows a slight improvement since compared to 2022-23. But as we're now Q1, at the end of Q1 of this year, do we keep these figures? Do we have these figures ready as to whether this is continuing? And my specific concerns were the last two sentences about chief executives, communities, directorate and schools, that there's a worsening trend, and I wondered if this is continuing and if it's as a result of chief executives, because we've said about the streamlining of services and the removing of certain posts. Communities, then again, we know we've been struggling to recruit to a number of positions, so there's already a small team there. And then so is it having an effect then on the teams that are actually in working, because there are more members of staff on sick? Are they on sick because of the increased workloads that they will then be carrying? And then in relation to schools, is it because of the stress? I know a number of head teachers are choosing to retire early or to leave the profession and go and get jobs elsewhere. So I wondered if we have any concerns with regards to the risk of head teachers, and whether we're content that we've got enough head teachers or teachers coming in and doing their qualifications, and so that they can take over as head teachers in the future, or will we be left short on head teachers too? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Just for the record, I'm Paul Miles, Group Manager for Human Resource and Organisational Development. It's got a good points in there, and I'll try and pick them up as I go through it. I think Lindsay will want to come in on the head teacher part, but I'll cover off everything first, if I can. So the first point, sickness figures did improve for 23-24, and that was down to a number of measures really within the organisation. We have an employee assistance program, an occupational health service that we work alongside and offer employees access to this at all opportunities and making sure they're aware of those facilities as well. The management of sickness is primarily carried out by the services and the line managers. So we're doing everything we can to empower those managers to ensure they've got the information available to support employees, and we know good absence management helps with our absence figures. I think touching on the next point, the challenge that we face is capacity and budget, and that's been mentioned a lot today. I think across the services, priorities are attempted to be realigned to ensure that we ask a fair roll of staff in terms of what they're doing. The level of, when we look at our sickness figures, we haven't quite concluded the reporting of Q1, but we're seeing across all organisations, other local authorities, that stress and anxiety is a key factor in terms of, is one of the highest sort of absence reasons. But we record on stress and anxiety work-related, and work-related isn't particularly high by comparison to stress. So I think it's more of a wider issue in society, cost of living, and a number of factors that bring in where we are as an organisation. Just touching on a point about retirement and recruitment, if I just pick up slightly on recruitment, obviously there is the selective vacancy freeze at the moment, and we've been clear with the trade unions where posts aren't being filled. Managers still aren't asking that team, the 2 members, for example, left in the team to pick up the work of the 4 people who were there before. It's got to be realistic, and we're working with managers on that to ensure that's fair. I think just moving on to the next point, I think it was a bit about retirement and head teachers before I let Lindsay come in. Retirement's a tricky one to judge, really, because minimum retirement age is 55, and we see some individuals wishing to work up to normal state pension age, which is 67, 66, depending on their current age, and we see some people wishing to go at 55. A lot of that is determined by each individual, how they've planned for their retirement. The pension world is a lot, people are a lot more aware of the pension world at the moment. There's greater access to pension information, support, and opportunity to save at earlier points for their retirement. Just picking up the head teachers, aware obviously a number of heads have retired this year. We do see turnover most years. We do see turnover every year with head teachers. They all tend to go at the end of the summer term. So it's not like elsewhere in the organisation, people go when they wish. They do tend to go towards August. We continue to work with education in terms of recruitment. Our numbers, I know for the majority of our head teacher posts that we've recruited recently, we've seen good level of applications. Colleagues in HR sit on those panels, support the governing bodies to appoint those head teachers and deputy head teachers, and we're seeing good numbers apply. So I think whilst there is a fair bit of turnover this year with head teachers, we continue to see the next sort of generation of head teachers come through, and we're in a fairly good place in terms of our recruitment of head teachers.
Thank you. Does that answer the question for you, Councillor Williams?
Not fully yet. I think Lindsay was going to come in, on the head teacher's point, and then if I just come back on one of the other points. Thank you.
Lindsay?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Williams. Yeah, just building on Paul's response, really. We've had 5 head teachers who have retired this year. That's not an abnormal number. It's less than 10% churn of our heads. That's in line with usual years, actually. But I think the interesting point is with all of the head teachers, obviously I meet with them and discuss their future and obviously wish them well and thank them for their work. But invariably discussions go on to the challenges they have faced. I think it's fair to say that after the 5 head teachers have gone, at least 3 of them had long-term plans to leave the job this year. So this comes as no surprise. and one has actually gone to another career outside education. Again, as explained for a long time, that particular head was keen on doing that, and indeed one of the heads has said that the plan was to retire this year anyway. It is a challenging role being a head teacher, there's no doubt about that. And going back to the question that Councillor Paul Davis raised at Council yesterday, it's something that as a local authority, through Paul and his team, and with a variety of other mechanisms that are in place, we try our best to protect and support our head teachers, as well as other staff, to make sure their needs are met. But it is challenging. I think one of the issues that Councillor Williams has picked up on as well is the challenges around recruitment. Paul is absolutely right. We've got a very healthy application for a head teacher post in Bridgend. Not so much, I have to say, in faith and Welsh medium schools. In some cases, that's been more challenging to attract poor people to those posts, but certainly in the English medium sector, strong applications, well over 10 in the last couple of cases, so really, really positive. But in Welsh medium and faith schools, that's more of a challenge, especially Welsh medium. Councillor Williams touched upon the throughput of senior leaders coming into schools. Members of this committee be aware of the National Professional Qualification for Headship. A steady flow of deputy head teachers from this county have been successful in that award this year, so we'd hope to see in the next few years them being made head teachers in Bridgend.
Thank you. All content, Councillor Williams?
On the schools element, but it was just more that, I mean, when I put in referrals, and I know all of us members will know, we put in referrals and we're told somebody's off on long-term sick in X department. It's, if we've got small teams now dealing and we have somebody off sick, that whole department can grind to a halt. So I wondered how we're able to deal with that, given that we know that communities has got a skeleton team in a number of places. How do they cope when somebody goes off on long-term sick if we haven't got anyone else there to step in? And how are we set as a local authority to cover any absences like that? Likewise, Chief Executive's Directorate has been cut back as well. So how do we cope, and how do we maintain services if we do end up with somebody going on long-term sick? Thank you.
Who would like to go first? Okay.
I'll give you an overall corporate view. I don't know what Ginny was going to do something specific, but I think first of all, to give you reassurance that we do try and cover that as best we can. I'm going to be honest though, there are resilience capacity issues and often single points of failure depending on where those vacancies occur. So sometimes if we only employ one person in a particular specialism, if that person goes off, you'll understand it's more difficult to cover. But what we have done, and I have at least 2 or 3 examples in my mind, is we have been able to shuffle people around, perhaps someone who's had previous experience in that role, and we've persuaded them to fill in while we establish a longer term solution. The other thing I'll say though is that, and this is not going to be a popular thing to say, but unfortunately this is the consequence of some of these cuts, both not just the vacancy freeze, but actually some of the MTFS cuts, where the reality is that we are less able in some cases to respond as effectively as we did previously. So I think as an organisation we need to try and cover that as best we can. We need to continue to try and provide as good a service as we can. But ultimately, if you have less capacity and less resource, I'm going to go back to my mantra, though, that's why you need to prioritise, and we need to understand which are the areas, and I think someone else said it earlier, which are the areas we're prepared to tolerate that there will be a low level of service, and which are the areas we're not. So I'd want to reassure you that, you know, it's a last resort to say, sorry, there's no one here, the doors are closed, we can't answer. But I'm finding increasingly where there's, you know, a single person in a service, or perhaps 2 people, and maybe they're both off. That is incredibly difficult to cover because there's also a loss of knowledge. So even if you pull someone in, they often don't have the background knowledge that the other person would have, and they find themselves starting from scratch trying to understand something, which I know is frustrating for members because often they will say, but I've already told this information 3 times or whatever. But so I understand the frustration, but you know, there's also an element of realism. So we'll try and cover it as best we can, but there are some circumstances where that is more difficult.
Janine?
Yes, thank you, Chair. For the purposes of today, I'm Janine Artigal, the Corporate Director for Communities. Actually, I think Mark covered that beautifully, to be fair, because that is the position that we're in. We have very lean staff resources, and there are circumstances now, currently, in 3 different of my areas where I have staff that are not in work, 2 of which are on long-term sick, and there is nobody that is there to do that role. So what we've had to do is to literally shuffle staff around. I've brought a resource in that previously was doing that role. They've agreed to come across to cover some things. I am looking at bringing agency in. Of course, bringing people up to speed is not easy. It is incredibly challenging. We don't want to leave work not done, but as we get further and further into this MTFS cut and the situation, particularly in my directorate, I've lost 40% of the staff, 40% of the budget, but unfortunately still have got practically 100% of the role. So there are areas in particular that are very lean and have no resilience. However, we are doing our best to cover those roles where we can, and also to get staff who are unwell supported and back into the workplace where we can. That's critical as well. We don't want anybody feeling that they don't want to be in BCBC. That's not what we want anybody to be. But so it's challenging. But as Mark has said, absolutely, we'll do our best to move it on. But what I would ask is that members do have, dare I say, maybe some patience when we are in that situation, because we are trying our best. We're not being obstructive here. We're trying to do our best to deliver, but it's through challenging circumstances. So thank you.
Thank you. Does that answer the question for you, Councillor Williams?
It does, thanks. And I don't envy directors in this position who have to try and juggle everything with minimal staff. Thank you.
No, thank you. I do agree. And I think the question I have as well is that obviously members have asked about statutory and non-statutory obligations down the line. And I don't know if it would help directors if there was clarity to members as to what is statutory, what isn't statutory, and then going forward, if there's a realignment of staffing resources from items that are non-statutory across to statutory to help alleviate that in some way. So I don't know if that would help.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We have done an exercise on that recently, corporately, but I'm going to be brutally honest, there's very little non-statutory left in communities. We've taken 14 million out in the last 5 years. So everything that was non-statutory, I'm afraid, has gone. So what I am left with is a whole raft of statutory services. Some of those that are non-statutory for me include regeneration and some parts of economic development. But of course, they are the services that are funded by millions and millions of pounds worth of grant. So the staff saving is very small, but we would forego millions and millions of pounds worth of grant aid. But the truth of the matter is now we are down to what level of statutory service can we provide at this stage. And moving forward, should we look to reduce services, it would be reducing the level of statutory service that we deliver. So incredibly challenging moving forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I absolutely hear what you're saying about the grant funding on the non-statutory items there, but it's a rhetorical question. Is it not the case as in business where, turnover is vanity and profit is sanity? Are we just putting grant funding into these non-statutory items to bolster the funding here to make it look better? Is that the case of this, or is it actually that it's, we could lose that because they're non-statutory items, and I know it would reduce the budgets, but...
So just to give you some examples, whilst the regeneration team some of the work they do the regeneration itself is non-statutory. However, some of the work they do is statutory. So for instance, the 2 major projects that are in that team currently are Maesteg Town Hall, a listed building, and we're commencing the Grand Pavilion, a listed building. So we have a duty of care on both those buildings to maintain, restore, and what they, to look after them. And both of those projects are funded by grant. So whilst the team that deliver them are not statutory, the conservation of those 2 listed buildings is, and it's something that sits with us, and we have a duty of care to them. So sometimes it's quite difficult, and also it's a very small team. There are 5 people in that regen team, and they're delivering over £50 million worth of projects, all that they've brought in via grant. So the saving would be minimal,
but the impact would be a very deep impact for us, because with a listed building and a conservation area, we have a duty to do that work anyway. So regardless of whether grant come in or not, we would have to spend money, the council's own money then, on maintaining those buildings. So that's a tough one, but I'm sure as the year goes on and we look through the MTFS, we'll be unpicking this deeper and deeper. Thank you.
Thank you. And you're quite right, it is difficult because they are inextricably linked. So, you know, the statutory and non-statutory, which is where we come down to the issue of what is each, and it's difficult to delineate. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Penhale-Thomas?
Diolch, Chair. So notwithstanding what Councillor Simon Griffiths has mentioned earlier, but perhaps a more reflective approach to PIs, which are amber and red, I just wanted to point out overarching observation really about the enormous disjoint that there is between some of the good work contained within this report, where you've got green, possibly some ambers would be considered to be relatively okay as well. So some of the good work contained in this report and the narrative that exists outside of the four walls of the civic offices. There's not going to be any surprise to anybody. The narrative on the street, anything to do with politics, council tax, politicians, councillors, officers, it's all quite negative. As an elected member, I could probably, in any one 12-month period, count on one hand the number of residents that would contact me directly to say thank you to the council for providing an excellent service, or to talk about an excellent service that's been provided by the council. And I'm pretty sure that may be the case percentage-wise for senior officers as well. So how are we rising to the challenge of promoting some of the good stuff that the council is doing? And it's equally relevant to some of the areas where the council is experiencing challenges or where there is need for significant improvement. The potential for case studies to show that we've actually, what we've done, where an action plan has been put in place. I'm pretty sure that those in receipt of those services which are requiring improvement would know that that's a relatively poor service and requires improvement. But where we are doing good pieces of work, that's not the narrative that's out there on the street. It's going to be no surprise. It's an enormous challenge. It's a perennial challenge. How are we rising to that challenge?
Thank you, Chief Exec.
Thank you, Councillor Penhale-Thomas. Actually, I'm glad you raised that. I think it's quite thought-provoking, isn't it? So one of the challenges I think is what you were describing really, is that there's perhaps an inevitable focus, not just in cost to be fair, but even at corporate management board and cabinet, that we tend to go straight to the reds, don't we? We tend to look directly and say, well, that's not going well. And I think one of the things that I sometimes reflect on, and perhaps we don't make enough of, or clearly we don't based on what you said, is that actually the overall performance of this council remains very good. So if you look at the key PIs, if you look at for example, our education performance, if you look at our main performance areas, we generally perform very well on an all-Wales basis. Now, there's a separate argument about whether we should be comparing ourselves just on an all-Wales basis or on a wider basis, but actually, that's probably not the narrative you get on social media. It's probably not the narrative you get as members, and it's probably not the narrative we often get even in our own debates, is it? So I have been talking to Anya as our new comms manager about how we have a plan to more effectively promote what we do well and make it more evident where our performance is good. And incidentally, I don't want anyone to go away here. I think we need to be very self-aware about the areas where we're not good and where we need to improve. So I'm not dismissing that for 1 second. But I think it does tend to mean that we're ending up focusing on the 1 or 2% of stuff that doesn't go well, rather than sometimes the 98% of stuff that does go well. So I think it's a challenge. I think it's probably a little bit, not just for Bridgend, it's a little bit for local government, isn't it? People have a perception, don't they, that and they focus on the stuff that doesn't go well. They focus when their bin isn't collected, or they focus when the weeds aren't cut properly, or whatever it might be. And I understand that, and that, of course, is important. But I do think there is a task, and it's one that we hope to demonstrate to you in the next few months, that we can more proactively promote both internally and externally what we're doing well, because there is an enormous amount of good practice. And as I say, overall, and Carys and I had the benefit yesterday of, for example, of talking to Audit Wales, there's a recognition that actually, believe it or not, this is still a good council performing well. And I think sometimes that gets forgotten, doesn't it?
Thank you. Content with that, Councillor?
Yeah, if I can just come back to you just briefly, I think Mark, you've hit the nail on the head in terms of the self-awareness. So I think we do need to be aware, and this report clearly points out where there is need for significant improvement. And you're right, yeah, it's about the grass cutting, it's about the recycling not being collected, it's about weeds on pavements, it's about potholes. You know, that's the general conversation. That's just a conversation down in Witherspoons at my steak on a Friday night. It's also the conversation on social media on a regular basis as well. So, but equally, people need to know that there are things that the council is doing well, and you know that's what we're paying council tax for as well. So, yeah, like you say, it's that perennial challenge. I think we can be better at it, whether that's a case study, whether that's showing where we have made marked improvement. Like I said, service users will know where. Service users in particular will know where we're not making that progress. But there are items and pieces of work that people are paying good money for via council tax that actually the council is very good at doing. And I just think we need to be better at showing that so that people can say, actually, this is what I'm paying my council tax for, and it's a good service.
I think it's fair comment. I think going forward as well with the new comms manager, that's something that we're addressing and will be addressing. So, yeah, thank you for that. Moving on, I will proceed to the next item on the agenda, as all invitees have been invited for that report as well, please. So if we could go to item 8, self-assessment. I will ask the officer to briefly introduce the report, and then I will call upon members who indicate they wish to speak by clicking on the raise hand button in turn. And then after this, I will ask our cabinet members if they would like to lay out their stalls as well at the end of this item. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today we are looking at the Council's third self-assessment in draft format. The Local Government and Elections Act 2021 requires us to complete and publish this annual self-assessment, reviewing 3 performance requirements, which are how the Council is running and how the Council services are performing, use of resources and governance. The report outlines these 3 performance requirements in more detail, and the process we have used to compile evidence, assign scores and come to our judgments, then test these judgments and produce the draft self-assessment that you have today as Appendix 1. Over the last month, we have taken all of this information and tested it with heads of service, CMB and Cabinet at CCMB, and in particular tested the AIM scores and narratives, the wellbeing objective scores, the use of resources scores and narratives, and the general feel of the report. In going through the process, heads of service CMB and CCMB are proposing that 3 of the 44 AIM judgments that we first came to be upgraded and 3 be downgraded. There are no proposed changes to the overall wellbeing objective judgments or the use of resources or governance judgment. If we take you to paragraph 3.9 and 3.10, these aims that are to be downgraded or upgraded are summarised along with the reasons for these changes in 3.11. So now I will now take members to the recommendations in paragraph 9.
Thank you, Kate. I have Councillor Winstanley first, please.
Thank you. I want to look at the first priority, which is a county borough where we protect our most vulnerable. And I'm concerned that we've got quite a significant number of areas where we have unsatisfactory or not very good performance. And those are on things that are as basic as keeping communities safe, helping people live safely, supporting children with additional learning needs, and supporting people facing homelessness. And obviously, these should be really strong priorities for us. And we've talked all the way through this meeting about our priorities. And sometimes what we need to be doing is thinking about what can we do to ensure that might be a relatively low cost because it would then prevent those higher costs further down the line. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to let you know, we have lost Jacqueline and Councillor Gebby from the chamber. Both have had to leave. So I don't know if you'd like to take it, Chief Exec. Yeah.
I'm certainly prepared to take it, but don't ask me too many detailed questions below the headlines. I think one of the challenges, and I'm sure Kate can help out here as well, is that the way that we are judging something, whether it's red, yellow, green, whatever, is relatively arbitrary, isn't it, based on whether you're within a percentage of the original target. I think the challenge sometimes then is trying to get underneath that and understand that, because I think I made the point earlier, some of these areas are quite wide as well, quite broad. So I think what this indicates is that, as you described, Councillor Winstanley, there are some areas here where we, on a performance indicator basis, for example, we set a target, we haven't come within 10% of that target, so it automatically is regarded as a red, as I understand it. That may be a concern in some cases, but also I think if we take an intelligent approach to it, sometimes when there's the explanation, it's less of a concern. You think, actually, okay, it's just a little bit delayed, or there's ongoing work that will improve this or whatever. So I think that's the bit I probably can't help you with as much as the detail from the service, but I think there are some cases, and possibly Martin can describe some of this with homelessness, for example, who is here, but there are some cases where we just need to look a little bit deeper, and perhaps we need to explain, for the benefit of members, to be fair, why something may not have been achieved, and then perhaps what the mitigation is and what we're doing to address that.
Thank you. Martin, did you want to come in?
I just find the indicator with 2 seconds. Right. Okay. Thank you for the question, Councillors. It's quite challenging in terms of the homelessness indicators issued by Welsh Government, and the narrative in the corporate in the CPA outlines this, because we've had legislative change in terms of homelessness prevention. So when someone presents as homeless, we always look to obviously avoid that homelessness through a support relief process. But with the legislative change that we've seen in terms of no one left out, Welsh Government has sort of mandated that it's a key priority. We're struggling to actually prevent that homelessness without actually interacting ourselves and taking control of that situation. And that's multiple reasons we spoke earlier about, in terms of the private rental sector not being available, the lack of social housing available in terms of the opportunities. So we're onto a bit of a losing element in terms of the PI, because it's a legacy PI based on legacy legislation that's causing us a significant trouble. So what we're seeing is within red, but those persons are being supported as we've seen the rise in the temporary accommodation costs, etc. From that perspective. So it's really difficult, because the first thing you see is a red, and what does this mean? But ultimately it's the ecosystem around the homelessness prevention that's causing the indicators not to be achieved, because of the lack of stock, as I said, and the private rental sector differentiation. But what I can assure you, that those persons who are presenting are being supported, and that's why we've seen the uplift around the temporary accommodation, etc. And then the moves for us to expand that stock by working with RSLs in terms of the social housing grant and the transitional capital. And just to point out, in terms of the social housing grant, last year we achieved £11.8 million in terms of provisions being for development, but that only equates to 119 houses. And we've got to be cognizant of the fact that only is relevant. That's up to 52% of the cost of the scheme. The RSLs themselves fund the 42%. So there's a significant investment for not a particularly large amount of homes. And then when I look at the social housing register in terms of our priority and our urgent need, we have circa about 1,200 people. And we've got a build programme based on Welsh Government social housing grant being around about 500 houses. So it's a real challenge. So even building more homes, etc., doesn't alleviate that problem. It's also a financial pressure. But I'm very cognizant that every time I come here to the scrutiny, homelessness is red, but that doesn't mean we're not actually supporting those individuals and their needs.
Thank you. Just very quickly on that, being a legacy PI as well, does that need reviewing then? Do we need to adjust that?
Well, that's something we're discussing with our Welsh Government in terms of that challenge, because it's a nonsense really in terms of what the PI is telling us from that aspect, because anyone that presents homeless, we've got a duty now to take them under our wing and support them. And it's, in terms of priority need, it's very wide, and that's where we've seen our numbers grow in terms of presentations. over the years since the COVID pandemic. But there's something we are pressurising Welsh Government in terms of getting real PIs that actually depict what the real picture is. And that's what we've seen in terms of the transitional capital. Obviously, our numbers have grown in terms of our temporary accommodation. That's where Bridgend has benefited from the transitional capital. As I said, 4 million last year and 4 million again this year, which is really positive for us.
If I may very briefly, because I may have misled you and pushed it in the wrong direction. I was, obviously we're on the self-assessment report, I was referring to the kind of PIs that we would look at in order to give this the evidence to make the score. So, I mean, we should note that, actually our proposed self-assessment judgment for protecting our most vulnerable is good, actually. But below that, there are a lot of reds, which is what we discovered on the last report, if you like. So I think I said something earlier about this. The balance is, does that feel right overall? I think overall, I feel that we are doing well. We're protecting our most vulnerable, and I think it is a good score. But it's the self-awareness bit, recognising, and that's we just heard of one pocket, but there are others where there are clearly some things that still need to be improved, and that's part of the problem with having quite wide 7 judgment scores, because you will all undoubtedly be able to pick out a pocket within one of them and say, well, I don't think that's good because that happened here or that didn't happen there. So that I wasn't intending we revisited all the PIs. It was more just how we got to our scores, if you like.
And I think you're quite correct there as well, because obviously for myself with social services, we can see that's reactive, and that impacts on the PIs that we have there, and that can skew things a little bit. So no, that's fine, that's not a problem. All content with that, Councillor Winstanley? Lovely. Moving on, Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much. I had a question which I discussed in the pre-meeting. I can't find the page now that it was on, but it was with regards to the thriving towns. And I note that on this report, it's showing fair work, skilled, high quality jobs and thriving towns is good. But somewhere else in the report, it said adequate for the people feel safe in our towns. That the towns are looking nice and tidy, and there's a lot of shops and everything. And I thought with adequate there, I think some towns are better than others with what they've got and how much investment has gone into those. And my concern is, as put in this, we've all been sat here now going through the budget and how little money there is. How can we achieve something like this and bring all of the towns up to the same level if we haven't got any money in the local authority? So that's how we are going to achieve this if we haven't got any money there. Thank you.
Janine.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Williams. It's a real challenge, absolutely. We are very heavily reliant on grants. A lot of the good work that we have done so far, for instance, the new restaurants, beautiful new restaurants we have in Bridgend in the evening, open in the day, of course, are down to the Transforming Towns grants. We've been able to assist people there. The work that we've done on My Stake Town Hall is all grant funded again. A lot of the work we do in the town centres is that. That's not to say we can't do other things to make people feel safe and improve transport, because that is more of a corporate initiative, really, about us all working together. And also partnership working is key here. If we give an example of recently, the Ospreys approached Bridgend about a possible move to the brewery field, and I have to admit, Team Bridgend put on the best show ever. We worked alongside the rugby club, private partners, the town council. We had the support that we had when we brought Team Bridgend together. It really does show what we can do. Partnership working is hugely important going forward. You are correct to say it's a challenge. It will be a challenge. Some of these indicators are difficult. Some of them were red because of schemes that were reliant on very large sums of money. For instance, the town centre PI was red in one area because there were 2 indicators in there. One was the Penprisk Bridge in Pencode, and of course our Levelling Up Fund bid for 25-30 million was unsuccessful. and another one of the PIs was linked to work with Network Rail around Bridgend Station. So overall, it gave a red indicator. However, some of the work I've just described to you, My Stick Town Hall, all the work we've done on the Transforming Towns and the grants and the work we do with our partners isn't really reflected there. So what we have agreed to do, because we took this to the Governance and Audit Committee last week, and we did agree to look at what makes up some of these PIs, to have a fairer reflection, or just to demonstrate the work that we are doing, and to take out PIs that are beyond our control, because of course if we can't control it, then why should our performance be linked to it? So we're going to try and amend those PIs, but you are right in that moving forward, improving those town centres is going to become more and more challenging because of our budget position. So I hope that provides a little bit of narrative. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you content with that, Councillor Williams?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions from members? No? In that case, I'm just going to very quickly ask our Cabinet members. I believe we've lost our leader as well. I don't know where he's disappeared to, but he's in a meeting, is he? Okay, not a problem. Who would like to go first on this? And just, it's not to hold you to anything, but obviously you are a new Cabinet. There's clearly going to be a new direction, and we're talking about ruthless priorities, I believe is the phrase that's been used in some instances. And we just wondered if you'd like to take the opportunity to let us know as a committee, and obviously the wider public and the wider council, what your priorities are, how you vision going forward, and what changes you will be implementing, hopefully, to help with the really difficult conversations that we have to have and we will be having, and how as well, not just what you want to do, but how you expect us as the members to help you with that, and as the committees as well, what you would like to see from the committees. So it's a two-way conversation, really, not a putting of the spotlight on you and what are you going to do sort of thing. So Councillor Farr, did you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Basically, we are a new team. We are working our way through to ensure that we set a sustainable budget. We will be coming out with some priorities to see what we can afford and what we can't afford. So we are a new team, and we are going to be working closely with officers to prioritise stuff. That's all I'm going to say at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Any sort of indication as to what steer you're going to be taking in your portfolio, please?
Not at the moment. Like I said, we are going to be working as a team to deliver affordable, a balanced budget and prioritise.
Thank you. Who would like to go next? I know you're on a job share. I don't know who's who's going to take it.
Thank you, Chair. I've been nominated to take it after discussion. Obviously, I'm Councillor Melanie Evans and was recently appointed as Cabinet Member of Resources as a job share with Councillor Eugene Caparros. I mean, during now a very short period of time, we have been in a position, we have taken the opportunity to meet with service area officers and directors. Deep dives are taking place to gain a greater understanding of the processes to exactly identify how they are working and what are the pinch points. You heard at Council yesterday and again here today regarding the monthly meetings scheduled to take place with Cabinet members and directors to monitor and discuss spend. Under One Council, we are exploring ideas and opportunities to ensure greatest impact and best outcomes, and also exploring the principles of invest to save and identify where and how this could be utilised, again to achieve outcomes and greater efficiencies. Priority will be to work together as a collective, to live within our means, while at the same time protecting the most vulnerable in society. However, as a newly appointed Cabinet member, It would be remiss of me to discuss any individual priorities, as we are a collective under the One Council approach.
You came to an abrupt end there. Thank you. I'm still taking notes, Councillor Evans. Sorry. No, thank you. That's interesting to hear. And it is within the spirit of One Council, because we are in dire straits. However, you are the Cabinet, and there has to be some leadership from yourselves and some direction and some steer. And that is what is required for the Council as well. So I'm heartened to hear from yourself, Councillor Evans, that meetings are taking place, that you are looking at priorities, that you are going to move forward on that. And obviously you can't talk about specifics at this point. I do appreciate that, but it is heartening to hear that those conversations are being had, because I know that the Council, although it is One Council, you are the leadership, and the Council will be looking to you for that leadership steer and political steer as well. So that's heartening to hear. So thank you very much for that. I do appreciate it. And with that, did you want to come back, Councillor Farr, on it? Anything? No, right. Okay, thank you. With that, if there's no further questions, apologies, Councillor Alex Williams. Can I bring you in?
Hi, good afternoon, Chair. Apologies for joining the meeting late. I had other commitments which I had to attend to, so I do apologise for that. However, I have to disagree that Cabinet members ought to provide some strategic direction. There is absolutely no reason why Cabinet members shouldn't be able to outline their priorities, regardless of whether it's a collective Cabinet. So can we go back to Councillor Farr and Councillor Evans to outline some of their strategic priorities within their remit? Thank you very much.
Councillor Farr?
No, I've already said what I need to say. Like I said, we will work together as a team with officers, and we will come back in due course to highlight what our priorities are as one team, one council. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, in fairness, Councillor Williams does raise a fair point here, in that you have been in since, was it May, the appointment? And we're now end of July. So strategically, there should be some sort of overview. Do you have any sort of overview at all?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Evans?
Okay, I'll repeat myself. At this moment in time, we are still working with officers and directors to better understand the what, why, where and how. And it would be remiss of me at this moment in time to actually discuss any individual priorities. So therefore, at this moment in time, no.
No problem, thank you. Councillor Williams, are you content with that? I guess not, but...
Absolutely not. No, I find it totally incompetent that our Cabinet members do not have any strategic priorities within their remit. And I find it, well, defunct of any kind of responsibility in their positions. So I'd like that recorded. Thanks.
I'm going to add to that, in that I feel that is harsh. I do feel that is harsh. However, it is Councillor Williams's opinion, but I would like to invite our Cabinet members to come back to COSC at the next meeting, if you're agreeable, because I presume you will have had your meetings and laid out more of a strategic outline there that you are comfortable with sharing. So if you're amenable to that, I'd like to invite you to come back. Councillor Farr?
Yeah, I think it's just to say, in between being elected as a Cabinet member, we have had a general election. So there's been no meeting with officers to discuss any direction. So hopefully by the next time we meet, there will be a lot more. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. But if you're content to come back and share that, because it is in the spirit of helping Cabinet members, not hindering or tripping up or anything like that. So that would be welcome, to give us a steer and to give us an idea. So Councillor Evans, are you okay with that? Do you want to come back on that? No? No, sorry, I thought you were going for your microphone.
I don't need to come back.
No.
I've heard what you've said. Thank
Yes.
you very much
Thank
indeed.
you. Cheers. Thank you. thank you very much. So moving on, if there's no further questions on the self-assessment item, I'd like to thank our invitees, and you may leave the meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you. If members of the committee could remain, please, that would be most welcome. Thank you. Right, thank you very much, members, for your patience there. I'm going to move us on to conclusions and recommendations, please. So if our scrutiny officer could summarise the key points and the committee makes its conclusions and recommendations off those. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, thank you, Chair. Well, if I go paper by paper, is that okay? So in terms of the revenue budget outturn, we covered a great deal of ground in terms of budgetary pressures and the process for managing the ongoing deficit. We talked about the reserves, we talked about the capital programme and the potential moratorium on capital expenditure in advance of the review going to council in the autumn. We talked about the council fund and the role that that plays. In terms of budget let me just say that I assume that under each of these there will be recommendations for each paper that will come from members, which obviously I will write down at that time and distribute. In terms of budget monitoring, we highlighted issues to do with school deficits, the sufficiency of plans in place to recover the current deficits, the skill sets of those advising schools and helping schools come to decisions. We talked about social services, early intervention and prevention, what are statutory and non-statutory services, and the lack of spare capacity and the need for resilience and elasticity in terms of the provision that we can offer in the local authority. We also talked about homelessness and the very substantial deficit that exists there, and whether we need very different plans to get the budget back on track, whether more capital would help reduce costs, issues around HMOs in Bridgend and the impact that some of them are having on residents in particular localities, and obviously issues around us being a non-stockholder of housing. I do have two recommendations that arose particularly from that one in terms of, well, offers as well, in terms of Councillor Gebby being happy to send us case studies to give to members, both in terms of children and adult services, and also a request for a SOC 2 briefing on legislative changes and the impact those are having on services. Also, it raised an issue about whether starker action was required in terms of the controls that could be put in place to manage budgets, to control costs, revenue budgets,
in certain key directorates. And then in terms of the Q4 performance report, I took down that there was an interesting dichotomy between what is driving our behaviour in terms of budget management and in terms of the relationship to performance, and whether some of the aims and objectives that we have in terms of performance are remotely achievable within the budget constraints that we have, whether there were too many well-being objectives and the affordability of so many objectives and our commitment to excellence, whether we needed a much more robust and limited list of priorities that members could buy into. We talked about staff sickness, recruitment and early retirement, the impact on service provision and the difficulties that can create, and being lean and sickness absence can lead to major service shortcomings. We also talked about the positive narrative about performance and whether there is good news that could be communicated more widely in the community. And then in terms of corporate self-assessment, obviously the emphasis was on a key priority of protecting our most vulnerable, but then whether this raised issues about the classification system that we have provided as part of the methodology in terms of the red, the amber, the green, and whether overall performance in this area and the way the methodology makes it look is entirely accurate. And obviously we're also working with PIs that come from Welsh Government and whether they need to be revised as well in certain areas. We also talked about thriving towns, highlighted the issue of tensions between available funding and priorities and whether that needs to be looked at again as well. And then there was, an interesting segment from council members, cabinet members rather, in terms of working as a collective within within our means and protecting the most vulnerable, but also the very clear need for leadership and strategic priorities to be set out. And there, I think, in terms of a recommendation, obviously it's for the Cabinet to come back to COSC to provide us with a much clearer picture of those strategic priorities, maybe even in September. That's all I've got, Chair.
Thank you. No, you've got pretty much the same as myself. So if I can take members back to the revenue outturn recommendations, additional breakdown of reserves from Caris, what is earmarked already, what is the situation? That's the note that I had on that, and I don't know if members want us to request that from Caris as a recommendation. Content? I'll take any dissenting voice. None. No. Lovely. Right. So if we write and ask Caris to do that. Cash flat settlements, I think it was Councillor Griffiths mentioned that it was a 3% real-time reduction. Do we need to write to the Welsh Government and point out to them that we are concerned about this and that we want their view on this, their steer on this, and what they intend to do going forward? Because obviously we've got the new government in Westminster as well, new working there. So I'm quite content as chair to write to Welsh Government on that if members are. Councillor Williams, can I ask you to come in?
Yeah, and in addition to that, Caris mentioned that we were supposed to have been having the 3-year plan, and obviously having a settlement late doesn't do us any favours. With limited staff, we're trying to scrabble at the end. We can't scrutinise fully, and it's very difficult to come up with a budget when you receive your settlement figure late as well. So I think we need to raise both those points as well, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm content to do that and press the Welsh Government for that as well. Everyone happy with that? Lovely. Moving on, we heard on the 5-point action plan, the drawback on it to make it I've written down the wrong phraseology here, so I'm not going to say that. But we understand that to make it more balanced, there you go, I'll change it to that. We need to make it more balanced in terms of what's coming out of the 5-point action plan. So there is a review underway. Can that review come to COSC, and can we look at that in one of our futures, which is more of a forward work plan item, I think, but maybe a recommendation that the review comes so we can put that in. Are members content with that? Yep. Lovely, grand. Moving on to budget monitoring. I did wonder if members wanted to invite governors to view SOSC 3 committee to help with their understanding of the situations as well, because I think there was discussion about the disconnect, and that our governors do need to have, I think it was training was mentioned, but I think part of that help and training to understand what is quite a dire situation for many schools with the budget sufficiency there that they have to return. It might well help governors to view SOSC 3 committee, because I don't think everyone does. So I don't know if members view that as a recommendation to go forward. Councillor Williams?
Sorry, SOSC 3 is communities.
Oh, sorry, my apologies. SOSC 1.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we do have a governor representative on the committee. My concern is, and I've raised this in the past, is governors are volunteers. Governors are parent governors who parents elect, who may not have a background at all in anything relating to a school. They're community governors and they're LEA governors. A lot of schools have got a number of vacancies as well, which you can't fill. So you've got small governing bodies with a few people juggling all of the plates and covering for the vacancies. My concern is that there isn't the same experience, there isn't the same length of service there. There's new governors. There isn't the same clear picture. Whilst the training is on offer for all governors and it's the same training, it's giving them a better understanding. And it's always the case of, oh, it's the school's responsibility. But this is our money at the end of the day. And I keep saying, if every school didn't repay their deficits, it's our money at the end of the day. It comes back to our pot. It's our whole. So we need to be more responsible and work more clearly with governing bodies rather than saying, well, that's for the school to do. That's for the improvement partner to do, because the improvement partner comes in and looks at the standards of teaching and learning, but he doesn't come in and look at the finances. That's not his job. And when Lindsay said he comes in, you have he or she, you have an improvement partner working closely with the school that is a head teacher. There isn't that link on finances and drilling down like that.
Okay,
so how we improve it, I don't know. Maybe there needs to be better communication. And whilst we used to have the forum, the Governors Association, that's always been trainings and BCBC led. And I think we need to put a recommendation there, I think, that maybe through that, we think of a better way of governors being supported to take on this role, because at the end of the day, it's over £5 million that these volunteers are responsible for.
I agree. Do members have any thoughts on this, please? Any suggestions on what we could do to encourage a better, I wouldn't say line of communication, but you know what I mean. Councillor Williams?
Well, if I go on to this, and I know we can pick it up in SOC 1, but it is a corporate risk, because there's a big, £5 million, over 5 million, and with more cuts, that's only going to increase. Lindsay said he met with head teachers about the budget. He met, and I know he's given a presentation to head teachers. That presentation hasn't gone to chairs of governors or governing bodies, and they are the ones inevitably making the putting together the budgets and approving the the plans, deficit recovery plans. So my recommendation would be that there is a meeting between Lindsay and chairs of governors to work on a way of how we can improve to make sure every school is working together as well in clusters, and every school has got the same idea, because we talk about one council, but our schools need to be working together as well and having support from each other, and governing bodies having support to make sure we can achieve these savings.
I agree. I think that's quite a good way forward for Lindsay to meet with the chairs about this, because if that isn't being communicated, then that's a very big chasm there. Really, you know, it is a risk, and also as well because it is a corporate risk. Does this need to be oversight at GAC? Should we be sending this to GAC for them to have a look at as well? If there's no objections to those two, then I think we'll take those forward. Thank you. Right. We mentioned about the briefing for SOSC2 members on Part 9 regs. So if Councillor Gebbie could organise that would be appreciated. And also as well, the case study to come to members of COSC about the early intervention. I think that would be welcomed as well if members are content with that as well. And then, of course, there's the starker action required in budgets. Do we need to be taking a firm line on that? What are members' thoughts on that? Councillor Williams?
Yeah, I agree. We should be taking a firmer line, sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I am concerned that, you know, we do not want to go into section 114, because if we go into section 114, then of course we lose all ability to shape anything, to move anything as councillors and as a council body. And we do subscribe to the One Council ethos. So I think we do need to, having seen today and heard today from the cabinet members, I think there is a need to help with the budgets here, and I do wonder if there is a need, rather than appointing an external commissioner, as would happen under a section 114, they would come in with an external commissioner. Do we need to be looking at appointing sort of an internal commissioner to help our cabinet and help our corporate bodies to manoeuvre on these cost savings that we have to achieve? Is that something that members think would be a good recommendation, a good idea? Any points of view? What I'm saying is we absolutely do not want to get to a section 114 situation. We absolutely do not want, lovely as he is, I'm sure, Max Caller coming in and taking over the council and telling us under section 114 what we can, what we can't do, and being brutal to that point. We do not want to get to that point, and my concern is, you know, how do we avoid that? How do we help the cabinet to avoid that as well? So that's the thought on having sort of an internal commissioner rather than external, who Max Caller would be. Councillor Williams?
I think even though we're told other local authorities are in the same position, and it's not just us, I think we do need to obviously protect ourselves and do all we can here in the hope that there is extra funding. But I think we have to just try everything at the moment. And if somebody who is just tasked with looking at, because sometimes it's a fresh pair of eyes, you look at something, you might find something. So I wouldn't be against recommending it.
Any other voices on this? Dissenting or otherwise? No. Okay, we'll move on that then for a recommendation for an internal commissioner. So that sort of brings us on to year-end performance, Q4. Do we need to do a review of the focus and ABC of the priorities to feed into the new cabinet as well, to help them organise their priorities? I was quite concerned at the fact that we are end of July going into August, and we need to move at pace is the long and the short of it, and we need to have that direction and that steer from our cabinet. We need to see that leadership, and I'm concerned that potentially, although we've only heard from a few members of the cabinet, and I know that others might well have different views, maybe because they've been in the roles longer as well, but do we need to be looking to do a review of the focus? Members, any thoughts on this, please? Councillor Williams? Please.
Thanks. Well, I'm not going to be nice because there was a paucity and a dearth of political steer from the two cabinet members who contributed to the meeting. It was quite clear that they do not have any kind of strategic direction within their portfolios. And I was quite shocked at how they weren't up to speed on their cabinet responsibilities. So I think that we need to reflect that in our recommendations and formally ask for them to outline their strategic vision within their respective portfolios.
Thank you. I also think as well we need to re-invite the cabinet members back to COSC in September for a clear review. So if members are content with us asking them for that strategic overview and then to ask them to come back as well in September. Councillor Williams?
Yeah, I totally agree, because if we're looking at these papers now and we're supposed to be working as one council, we could be wasting our time and effort on the wrong areas if we know that the suggested focus should be elsewhere. But also on this report, and we're talking about when I mentioned about the deep dives and keeping it strategic, it would be good for this sort of information to go to the subsequent committees so that we could do a bit more of the deep dive and look at the individual areas, because it's come to us. And I mentioned in our pre-meet as well, the previous report, we had it yesterday in council, the same report, and then it came here, but it hasn't been to the subsequent committees who would then look at the information. So it's no good us having it, all of this information at our specific committees when we have our settlement from Welsh Government. We need to be having that early as well so that we can look at everything in detail. If we're going to make any of these savings, we need to start yesterday, not further down the line. Thank you.
I absolutely agree with you on this, actually, in that I think it's important for us as members to have that steer and have that direction as a political direction rather than officer-led direction, because we can't reflect back to, like you say, our committees, can't reflect back to the cabinet. We can't help under the One Council ethos if we do not know what the leadership's direction is going to be. And it is a new leadership. It's we've got a new leader, we've got some new cabinet members here, we've for the first time got the joint working cabinet members there as well on the job share. So it would be good for us to know what the direction is politically, to have that steer so that we can help them, because otherwise, like you say, we are working blind a little bit. And I think that would help us to help them. And there is a One Council ethos. We do have to adhere to that. But we are hamstrung somewhat if we don't know what the direction is that the council is taking. So I think from that point of view, that would be welcomed. And I'd certainly welcome the cabinet members to come back in September with some sort of steer. Members all content with that? Any dissenting voices? No? Okay, lovely, thank you. And I do appreciate that I did put them on the spot a little bit, so I will be kind to them because of that. However, I do understand what Councillor Williams has said, and they have been in since May and should really have a good grasp on the direction, because time is against us. You know, we can't dilly-dally on this. There is an urgency here that needs to be grasped, and that leadership does need to grasp that. Moving on, self-assessment, homelessness PIs on the homelessness is legacy. Does this need reviewing? What are members' thoughts on that? I know it's sort of an external PI, but internally, do we need to be reviewing it as well in order to help Martin and his department? Thoughts? Councillor Winstanley?
We certainly need to be reviewing the PIs and ensuring that they are working for us as well. And they need to be in line with what Welsh Government wants us to measure as well. So that's certainly a recommendation that we should be making.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Anyone else? Any dissenting voices? No? Lovely, thank you. Have I missed anything, Stephen? I don't think so. Anyone else got anything to add? If not, I think we're done on the recommendations. Thank you very much. I'll move us on to item 10, which is Corporate Parenting Champion nomination. We did have, oh, sorry, my apologies. I've missed a bit. I will ask the Scrutiny Officer to present the report, and then I will call upon members who indicate they wish to speak by clicking on the raise hand icon in turn. The committee is requested to nominate one member of the committee as its corporate parenting champion to represent the committee at meetings in Cabinet Committee. Have I just read your bit out? No, sorry, gosh. I give up today. I'm so sorry, members. Do you want to say anything? Sorry.
I was going to say that this might be tricky to do, given how few members are actually in the meeting at this point. Not just this item, but the item to follow on Cumtath Morgannwg. But obviously, amongst the members who are here, if there is somebody who would like to do this, that would be great.
Thank you. I think previously it was Councillor Tim Thomas who has said he would give way on corporate parenting if somebody else wanted to take it. I don't know if there is anybody else that would like to take it. Oh, silence, silence from the ranks. Okay. If there's nobody coming forward,
I think we're going to have to leave this and come back to
I'll
it.
do it, Freya, if you want.
Oh, are you sure?
Yeah, I'll do it. It's fine.
Thank you, Alex. Councillor Williams, apologies.
Just
Right.
to be formal about it, could somebody nominate and second?
Yeah.
I'll nominate Alex.
Somebody second?
I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Thank you both. Right, thank you, Councillor Williams. I'll make a note of that. And then moving on to item 11, I will ask the Scrutiny Officer to present the report, and I will call upon members who indicate they wish to speak by clicking on the raise hand icon in turn.
Okay, this one might be even trickier in the sense that the purpose of this report is to request the committee to nominate for the 2024-25 municipal year 5 members to the Cumtath Morgannwg Public Services Board Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and 1 substitute member to attend when one of the core members are not available, based on the political balance of the committee. At present, that means that we need 3 members from Labour, 1 member and 1 substitute member from Bridgend County Independents, and 1 member from the Democratic Alliance. I'll hand back to the chair for nominations.
Thank you very much. It feels like a poison chalice, thank you. But moving on, Councillor Williams, can I bring you in, please?
Yes, thank you very much. Oh,
you okay?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I was echoing there. Someone had their microphone on. Yeah, I was on this previously, and having spoken to Councillor Tim Thomas, I've agreed that I will swap with him. So I will nominate him on the committee, and yourself, Councillor Bledsoe, as the forgotten the word now for the substitute. Yeah, if that's okay.
Do you want to go as a substitute member from our grouping?
No, I'm happy for you to do it if you want. And
thank you, because I'm aware of my workload, but I'm also equally aware of your workload. I'm happy to go then as a substitute. That's fine.
And that's our group done. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So then that brings me to Councillor Granville for 3 members from Labour, if possible.
I can't give the names for the 3 Labour members, but I will withdraw my name. I found it wasn't very productive. Didn't learn anything. The year I was doing it, it's not wasting my time. I got better things to do in my life, so I will not put my name forward. Thank you, Chair.
No problem. Thank you. Councillor Williams, I know you're going to echo this, is it?
It's a rare occurrence that Councillor Granville and I fully agree, but I have to say I have to question the merits of this organisation to our County Borough Council in the last year. As Councillor Granville has said, I don't think it has been worthwhile of our time. And unless things change with regarding the remits of this Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee, I don't believe the Democratic Alliance will be putting anyone forward.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, did you want to come back? Or is that a legacy hand? Councillor
Is that me?
Come back? Oh, sorry. Councillor Williams?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what the other 2 have said, which is why I was quite happy when Councillor Thomas said he would like to go on the committee. It was disappointing in that we've raised this with our scrutiny, and I feel our scrutiny here has moved on, and we have been listened to when we ask for things to come to us in advance. There's no point scrutinising something that's already happened. That's what we were doing there, and we were simply plucking questions out for the sake of asking questions when all of the information was there. Our input would change nothing, and it was rather pointless. And again, you question, we have got extremely overworked staff here, and they are then attending these meetings as well when we've got capacity issues. So if we're looking at saving things, we need to be looking at our staff too and not giving them too much work. Thank you.
No, I think that's a fair point. And I am aware that I understand that Merthyr doesn't send anyone to this either. Do we wish to be in the same situation as Merthyr and say thank you but no thank you? Is that where the members are going? It looks to be. I mean, I am content to say thank you but no thank you and join Merthyr if that's what you wish. And I do understand why you would say that as well, with the staffing resources that we have and the issues there, as well as the seemingly futility of attending. Councillor Williams?
I think while doing that, perhaps we should express our concerns about the inefficiency, the inefficacy of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee rather, and see whether the remit of it can change, and therefore it would be worthwhile for us to attend. You know, there's merit in ensuring that we have a collaborative approach with other local authorities, but it has to be done in the right way. So perhaps before we burn our bridges altogether, we should write to them to ensure that our concerns are taken on board, perhaps see what they say and then review it at the next meeting. But certainly if it stays as it is, I think we've heard unanimity across the various different groups today in that it hasn't been a worthwhile exercise thus far.
No problem, that's fine. Absolutely.
Just to follow that up, I mean, concerns have been expressed about the sort of day-to-day workings of the committee and the way that it is supported. So it's a concern for officers as well in terms of the way business is transacted, the lack of business often, and the lack of training opportunities that have been provided to new members. So maybe we could produce something that expressed members' and officers' concerns about the working of the Scrutiny Committee.
No, I'm content to do that and write in the first instance and then review at the next meeting in September, if members are content with that. Thank you very much. Right then, moving on to item 12 of the Forward Work Programme. I'll ask the Scrutiny Officer to present the report. I will then call upon members who indicate they wish to speak by clicking on the raise hand icon in turn.
Thank you, Chair. The forward work programme for COSC is attached as Appendix A for the committee's consideration. The recommendations monitoring action sheet to track outstanding responses to the committee's recommendations made at previous meetings is attached as Appendix B. The forward work programme for the subject overview and scrutiny committees will be reported to the next meeting of COSC, with the comments from each respective COSC following consideration in this cycle of meetings. I'll hand back to the Chair for any questions or comments from members. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before we start as well on the forward work plan, and I have had the message from member services about the DFGs and where that needs to go, and the fact that Martin Morgans is going to write a written update. It was requested and it will be circulated to COSC. However, my concern is that DFGs need reviewing and need looking at with a degree of urgency, I think. And I think some members are wanting to send it to committee straight off. So if members are content for that report to go straight to SOC 2 with SOC copy to review, I'm quite happy to put that onto the forward work programme for SOC 2. So that, sorry, can you use your microphone so others can hear?
I think that's appropriate, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else content or discontent? No. Okay, we'll do that then. We'll ask for that. Anything else on the forward work programme? Are we all content with it? Any issues? Any dissenting voices? No. Perfect. Thank you. I'm quite content with it as well. Oh, Councillor Williams?
Be pleased to hear it's not a dissenting voice, but
Good.
correct me if I'm wrong, but don't we have oversight of all of the other scrutiny committees' forward work programs, just so that we're aware of them? I don't see them as part of the document pack. Perhaps it's not necessary at this particular juncture, but it is useful, I think, for us as the overall corporate overview and scrutiny committee to have oversight.
Thank you. I'm going to bring the officer in.
Maybe I can explain. They wouldn't ordinarily have come to this meeting on this occasion, but it was felt that because the last meeting had been cancelled and that there were going to be 4 very substantial items on this agenda, that adding another, what is always nearly 100 pages of additional forward work programs and action records and so on to the agenda might be a bit much. I think it was anticipated that this meeting would go on for many, many hours. So the idea is that we bring them to the next meeting in September. So that will happen as normal, but we'll bring them in September.
Thank you. Content with that, Councillor Williams?
Yes, that's fine, and I'm happy to take members through the rationale behind some of the decisions which Scrutiny Committee 1 have made regarding their forward work programme at the next meeting.
Thank you. Cheers. Lovely. So with that in mind, if there's nothing else on the forward work programme, I'll move us to item 13, the urgent items. There are no urgent items of business in respect of notice, of which notice has been given in accordance with Part 4, paragraph 4 of the Council Procedure Rules. So with that, I will close the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance and your involvement.